Hey there, soccer freaks. This is ATL On Fire, the podcast where we talk all things Atlanta United Football Club. So sit back, buckle up, enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of ATL On Fire. If you are not subscribed to our channel on YouTube, down here in the corner, over there, down there, a little red button, get it done. Over where? And yeah, you'll find us on Twitter at ATL On Fire, and appreciate any reviews on Apple as we increase the number of podcasts we do. Dave, we're doing pretty well now. We're starting to find our groove, and
very nice.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for listening. There's a lot to talk about on the Atlanta United front. We just finished up some international soccer between the Euros and the Copa America, and
right.
Yeah, Dave. So what are we drinking here this evening?
Well, we might get into it later, but I lost a bet to Mikey Dobbs during the Euro final.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So I had to bring over a very nice wine. This is an Alexander Valley Cabernet. From Sonoma with, as I read on the label, it has hints of a number of other grapes. It's very nice.
Oh, that is delicious. Loving it. Well, thank you, because I feel like, I was in the right place on that bet, which, if I can bring you up to speed, Dave and I were together watching the England and Italy final during the penalty shootouts, and as the overtime kind of was waning, we were talking about the forthcoming penalty kicks, and Dave,
the inevitable penalty kicks.
Dave was convinced that Southgate, due to his own personal player issues, having missed a penalty kick years ago, had prepared this team to be ready for penalty kicks, and so it would be an England advantage going to penalty kicks, which I adamantly disagreed with, because frankly, penalty kicks are a crapshoot, A, to begin with, and B, there's just so much emotion going on that even the best players in the world, like Messi, can tend to miss. Who do we see miss in another game? It was Mbappe, right? Great goal scorers very often miss penalty kicks, and so the idea for me that you could prepare a team to mentally be ready in a moment that they've never even been in seemed a little silly to me, Dave.
Well, I agreed with you that penalty kicks are a crapshoot, and I agreed with you that ultimately that I didn't like the idea of I brought on Rashford and Sancho just for taking penalty kicks, which I think is never a good idea. And we right away brought up the fact, okay, if you're going to bring on two young, speedy, really good goal scorers from two of the top leagues in Europe, why not give them 15 or 30 minutes against two of the oldest defenders in the whole tournament to see if they can run by someone and score
at home. And I feel like that's where the coaching fail with Southgate came in. You're at home. Why not lose with it being your decision with 30 minutes in overtime, right? And so
and he likes to play, like 8 defenders and just 3 attackers, but you could have just freshened up the attackers. You might say, all right, well, he left on those players to take penalty kicks, but Raheem Sterling didn't take a penalty kick. He could have replaced him with Sancho, who's a very like-for-like player, and still kept his 8 defenders on the field and would have been fine.
Yeah.
But anyway, I felt that training penalty kicks and practicing and having a game plan would give them advantage. And I thought that Southgate, having missed a penalty kick in the World Cup himself, was so adamant about having the team prepared. They finally got over the hump in the previous World Cup in Russia, where they finally won a penalty kick shootout after many, many, many appalling failures in England. And I thought that they would win again, but I was wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, particularly the move to bring them on cold, having been on the field for 60 seconds, younger players, and they've talked about this on other shows a million times, that I think ESPN FC's kind of hammered this one to death, really. But the fact that you want to put the pressure on your most senior players in that moment, even if the data at practice says, you know, Sancho and whoever it was have a better record. I think it's just too much backlash you're putting on those players too.
Yeah, it was Rashford and Sancho he brought on,
and so anyway,
and then he allowed Saka, who has to be 17 years old, to take one. I don't mind young players taking it. I actually, again, disagree with you a little bit there, but I don't like the idea of bringing on a player who is not at all in the game to take one.
I don't mind young players taking them in normal games or whatnot, but I think on a stage like that, it's a completely different situation where you're, the upside to Saka making that versus the downside, I think doesn't make sense to me. And, because it is one of those situations where, you watch enough of these penalty shootouts, it's almost like inevitable. It's like you can feel it coming. And sure enough, it did. And, I feel bad for, these guys that, their head wasn't necessarily in the game and had to come in last minute. But,
yeah, it's an appalling end, unfortunate.
But on, the south side of the equator, I personally was happy to see Messi lift his first international trophy of meaning with Argentina. I thought it was nice to see that in that final he didn't have a great game. Played okay, but didn't have anything.
Apparently, they said afterwards that he was injured and played anyway, which seems weird. But he didn't look like he was moving too badly. But.
No, he didn't. And other than the slip where he could have really sealed the deal.
Yeah, it's funny. In all the goals that Messi has scored over his career, how many ridiculously difficult finishes did he have? And to miss that one. For the podcasters, listeners who didn't see that, which, come on. But it was an absolutely stunning through ball. Split the two defenders, put him right in on the goalkeeper at the, sort of 6-yard box, corner of the 6 box. And instead of just hitting it one time in the corner, he got a little cheeky and tried to cut it back. Ederson in goal did a nice job of, not buying the fake completely. I think Messi still would have gone by him had he not slipped, but he slipped on the cut and allowed Ederson to recover and win the ball.
Yeah, 49 times out of 50, Messi's finishing that,
Yeah.
All right, let's bring it back home to Atlanta. We've had 2 games since our last podcast?
I think just one. We talked about the July 3rd game when I was out in Seattle.
That's right.
And so... that game we talked about how, walks failed to read the danger.
But in the Nashville game where we tied 2-2 with a very thinned out team.
Very thin.
It was Walks, right, who had a nice header.
Walks opens up the game in the 5th minute, on a free kick at the back post, guided a header back, put it back where it came from. Nice goal.
Yeah, Moreno, again, good signs from him. I mean, I think, whipped in a great ball to Walk's head, and Walks put it away and just squared it away to the far netting. And I was pleased to see that, especially with a team that was missing a lot of players, to say the least. We were able to come away with a point, and I would say I would have taken that had you asked me at the beginning of that game.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have the U.S. internationals. We didn't have Barco, who was on Olympic duty for Argentina, and we didn't have the South American players, Martinez. We also had a couple of injuries in Ibarra, so, no Guzan, no Bello, no Robinson, no Alan Franco, no Martinez, no Barco. That's a thin roster.
Yeah, and so we've got a ton of injuries. And one bit of good news going into Saturday's game, though, is Jake Mulroney's red card was appealed and overturned.
Yeah, so what did you think?
I immediately thought that it was a good tackle, just even in real time. I'm a fan of letting strong defensive plays go, as long as studs are not up and it's not truly endangering the player. And I just don't think that was on the naked eye, immediately. I didn't jump to saying that was a red card, nor did I think it was he was necessarily on goal by himself. I think there was another defender back as well. So
yeah, Wax was close.
But then on the replay, I quickly was, I was like, oh, they'll go to VAR, they'll overturn this, and I think even some of the commentators were on that side of the coin too, and they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'll say is, for those podcast listeners who are still developing as footballers, Mulroney gets himself in trouble because he's completely a one-sided player. He's all left foot, which is why when he's on the right side, he cuts everything back predictably to cross. He cannot cross with his right foot. And there, he's playing basically, from the left back situation. He's coming across to the middle. And the correct defensive play would have been to swing up the field back into the challenge. But instead, he challenges with his left foot coming across the player. He gets all ball. But when you do that, the rest of your body is cutting right across the player and you take him down. So I don't think it's a foul, but it is really poor technique.
Yeah. I will agree with you. He's very much a left-footed player.
He's all left foot.
But there was that one game where at the 90th minute, he cut it back to his right foot, crossed it to Moreno, and headed it. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, it's funny because, when I've seen him try with his right foot, it hasn't been too bad. And, it doesn't seem from that he's so left-footed, but he is so not confident. He doesn't use it at all. And there, as a challenge, I mean, the technique was really poor. And you're going to get, as a defender, if you challenge with the wrong foot, you're going to get yourself in trouble all the time. It has to be perfectly timed. And in this case, it was basically perfectly timed. He did get all the ball, but you're still going to get yourself in trouble because the body takes the man.
Yeah.
But, fortunately, in the great infinite wisdom, the man behind the curtain in MLS said, oh, the referee got it wrong, VAR got it wrong, and they rescinded the red card. So we apparently get 2 challenges for red cards during the season, but if the challenge is upheld, then we retain our 2 challenges.
Good. So we still have 2 more challenges.
We still got 2, so,
So sorry, Dave, I was just bringing up the injury status.
Very fancy. It's almost like we're a real podcast.
I know, and I've shared this with the Twitter sphere because as we've talked about on the podcast, they've really done a poor job of keeping fans informed of who's going to be available for the next game. So this spreadsheet I put on our Twitter account at ATL on Fire, I'm going to try to keep this up to date, at least best I can by reading up and putting a date and what we've heard in the news in terms of their injury situation and or availability. It seems like some of the folks I was unclear on, like Josef Martinez and I think is going to be available. But I think that is going to bring us to our next part of our podcast here, which is
right on
today's big topic, Josef Martinez. Evidently, Heinze said that Josef is practicing by himself, not due to fitness, but due to purely a coaching decision, which he is confident he's making the right decision on. So there is a ton of speculation out there, of course, on these social platforms where it is a little bit comical just to go out there and see what the speculation is. I try not to dive in too deep. Rumors right now, I think the biggest one that I think people are concerned about is, does this mean that Josef is potentially going to be transferred in the summer window here because he wants out? Do you believe that to be the case?
I don't know. The last time that we had a player trained by themselves, which I believe was Gressel, who disappeared unceremoniously from Atlanta United. So the precedent is poor. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, nobody could have ever predicted that a sometimes temperamental Josef Martinez and a fire-blooded Heinze might get into a bit of a scrap. And right? Does it surprise anybody?
No. And that's what I think this. Personally,
I hope so.
I hope so, and I think that's what it is because, it does not make sense at all in terms of, at least reading the tea leaves that I have, in terms of really, up until this point, has there been any issues with Josef saying he wants to go to another club or he doesn't want to be in Atlanta? No, there's none of that. He's also coming off a major ACL surgery. His worth is very low right now. He's only got two.
Gotta be the worst.
He's only got 2 goals in 2021.
Yep.
And so he's really not a proven commodity. So I don't see where his value on the trade market would even be high. And like, where would he go? Like, he's done with Europe. He's already been there. He's come back. He's 28. He's not going back to a major competitive European club, period, the end.
I'd have to believe that he's being transferred. He would be transferred, should I say it, to another MLS club.
I think that is a much more likely thing, yeah, because I think Josef also likes the States. I think he's become very comfortable, as you see on social media, with other sports, figures in the Atlanta market, but I think he likes the lifestyle, and I actually like the fact that if this is a pissing war between Heinze and Josef, that Heinze is the one that's putting him in a corner, because Josef does have a lot to prove right now. I want, like, as a fan right now, all I give a crap about is goals. I love Josef Martinez. He gave me a championship, but what are you doing for me today is all I care about on this podcast, and that's all he should care about. And if the club is looking at the statistics of people who have ACL injuries, the data is not good for Josef. Doesn't mean he can't be the exception, but while he's come back 100%, as in he's here and he is playing, the data for all sports that, I don't know, I read in a Guardian article, so take this with a grain of salt. In the NFL, like running backs and wide receivers, their performance, even when they come back, like they're 100% there, but their performance is 1/3 of what it was statistically once they're back on the starting lineup.
Your NFL and raise you Adrian Peterson.
And I raise you the fact that the data right now says Josef Martinez has 2 goals, which feels like it's probably 1/3 of his typical curve at this point in the season. I don't know how many games we've played, but 2 goals.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it on the podcast. He's definitely not 100% back yet, but he's shown some signs of definitely getting better. And so, I don't think at least I or anybody could have reasonably expected that Josef Martinez would be the Josef Martinez of pre-ACL, first game out. Like, there's just no way. He was always going to take a half a season to get back up to speed. So, I wouldn't worry about it yet if
someone was arguing the counterpoint of, funny enough, on Twitter that Jordan Morris is a good example of a recovery. Well, I think that's
second ACL.
I mean, I'm sorry, I love Jordan Morris, and I like Josef Martinez, even though Jordan plays for Seattle.
Seattle.
Sadly, I would almost mortgage this house on the fact that we're not going to see him playing competitively at the U.S. men's national team. I hope Jordan proves me wrong and comes and squats on my house. But sadly, sadly for him, I feel like the stats of that happening are really poor for him.
I have to say, though, the attitude, what have you done for me lately? It's pretty harsh. Right? It is Josef Martinez.
I know, but I agree. But, at the same time, the same fans that love Josef are complaining about the product in the field and what we're producing. And at the end of the day, it's kind of cutthroat when it comes to that.
Well, I think I said early on that, mid-season, second half, if Josef Martinez returned to somewhere in the ballpark of his old self, that we would see a strong Atlanta United finish. But if he didn't, it would be a long season because we don't have really any real replacement for him. And Kubo Torres, of the I'll raise my hand to be seen.
Yeah.
Right? What the heck was that? I mean, dear podcast listeners, right? The free kicks coming in. Khan is there to catch her. It looked like he was going to punch it. It was a little weird. But clearly there to make the play. And Kubo Torres reaches out to stop the ball. What the? I mean.
Yeah.
Like,
And so right after that, I put a Twitter poll out there at ATL on Fire on, who's been the worst secondary striker we've had at the club to date.
oh,
I put Kubo Torres, Adam Jean, and Kenwin Jones in that poll. And by far, Kubo Torres, of course, time is always creating a bias here, but 83% agreed Kubo Torres is the worst secondary striker. Interesting on some of the comments, the best secondary striker, Tito Villalba.
well, yeah,
And really
it's hard to call him a secondary striker.
Yeah, I know
he
he's
played
he's a
alongside
winger.
Martinez a lot, you know.
but
yeah, he was fantastic.
Yeah. So where was I going? Get me back on track, Dave.
Well, we haven't talked about the rest of the game. We score very early first on the road, great start, and then, not too long after concede a corner kick of our own. I don't know what you felt about that, but it almost looked for the first time like in the middle we were kind of zonal marking. It was weird. They were man-to-man marking. It wasn't a true zone. But Sosa wasn't really tracking his guy. He looked like he was zoning.
Yeah. If I remember, I just was thinking about kind of your you noting the fact that, again, on corner kicks, you're not playing the man, you're playing the ball.
Right.
And I think that was a classic case of, as a collective, there was whoever was in the arc of where you're playing the ball didn't get the job done. So I mean, that's how all corner kicks are scored at the end of the day. No one was right there challenging where the ball is coming down, and that's what the collective has to figure out. Somebody's got to be just hell-bent on getting up into a challenging position, whether it's the shortest guy on the field or the tallest. Right. Somebody at least make an effort to make it difficult, right? And so,
right,
yeah. But I was happy to see that Kubo got subbed off, and Heinze finally got his head out of his ass and took Kubo off the field and gave somebody else a chance.
Yeah, Jackson Conway.
Again, one of my my biggest beefs with Heinze right now really has been the Kubo thing, and he proved me right. He put in Conway, and what's he do? First opportunity that kid gets, golazo. So
nice goal. So Jackson Conway played 4 minutes at the end of last season and scored, and now he's played 4 minutes on this game and scored. So maybe you should put him back in the game.
And in the meantime, Joseph's playing juggling in the corner.
Oh, and Kubo
so what do you think? Do you think that in the New England game on Saturday, Joseph's going to get the start? Like, what does this mean? Like, it's very strange.
I've never heard of a player training by himself outside the team being even included on the match day roster.
Right.
So I would have to say that Josef Martinez, sadly enough as it is, and I'm going to the game, so I would say he's got to be not even in amongst the subs, you would think, unless there's maybe they can make up. Maybe there was an argument and Heinz says as soon as you are willing to, say you're sorry, we're fine or something, and then maybe it could change. But unless something changes and he actually trains with the team before Saturday, then I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah. Yeah, not a lot of good smoke signals coming from the Josef Martinez thing. And where there's smoke, there's usually fire. I don't know what the fire is, though. I can't believe it's a trade. It just doesn't make sense on so many fronts. So I hate to come back to that, but just
I'm a little bit concerned it's a trade. I have to say. It seems to me that it doesn't make any sense. I agree with everything you said, but it seems to me, unfortunately, like it could be a trade.
Like, where would he go?
As I said, maybe somewhere else.
David
in the
Beckham
MLS.
talk him into going down to the.
Well, he could go to any MLS team. They would all want him, right? To take a chance. There's a lot of teams that need a striker and take a chance that he's coming back. And maybe Heinze has seen enough in training to say, I don't think he's ever coming back. But that would seem awfully quick to judge. I mean, maybe at the end of a full season, but you know. I'm not sure about that, but it worries me. I'm not sure. And to be honest with you, this is where our front organization has not necessarily inspired confidence lately. You don't feel like they're necessarily all on the same page making good decisions for the club. Early on, you felt like it. Yeah. And we had some conversations about, what it was. And to be honest, every day that goes by makes it seem a little bit more like the genius was all Tata.
Yeah, I hear you. I just don't know if I truly believe that. But there's definitely some things there that hold true. But I also feel like, Tata clearly had so much influence even before the club began, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, the fact that
I'm not in terms of coaching. I meant in terms of player selection, and recruitment. Like, he got a lot of the players. He handpicked,
right?
Al Marone, and he handpicked Josef Martinez, and he handpicked Tito Villalba. Right?
So let's go on to that being like the Heinze equivalent, right? So since we're going to look at the player selection that I would assume that Heinze had influence over, right? It's Sosa and it's Ibarra.
Yep.
Two players that, from what I've seen, I know Ibarra's injured right now, are excellent picks in terms of targets.
Sosa's been, class. And Ibarra, very young, but has shown promise, so I got no problem with that. The one, who so far has been a bust is Alan Franco, who's supposed to be the star, of them
Agreed.
all.
But
it's unclear, I would assume that Heinze had a huge role in selecting Alan Franco coming from the Argentinian league, but, I don't know.
So since you've got a U.S. men's national team jersey on,
yes, I do.
And the U.S. played Haiti a few days ago.
Yeah, condolences to the country of Haiti for all of the madness that's going on there.
Yeah, hard enough to be a Haitian, but to have that going on. Kudos to the players, put on a hell of a match against the U.S. team. But our Miles Robinson got a full 90 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Miles Robinson has got to be in contention, for the U.S. national team. It's interesting. So Berhalter chose to go, whatever they call that, the CONCACAF Nations Cup. He went with all of the European stars. And to be honest with you, I do think that I questioned it at the time, but now I think calendar-wise it makes a ton of sense, because all the European players were just coming off the season, the Pulisics and the Weston McKennies and et cetera, all these Sergio Dest, great young players coming off a long season. They went right into the CONCACAF Nations Cup. It's not as long as the Gold Cup in terms of calendar time and not as many matches. They played it. They won against Mexico, got all the momentum, and then chose basically an entire MLS roster for the Gold Cup.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you got to feel like with the center back pairing that we had for the CONCACAF Nations Cup, that Robinson, it wasn't that strong, and you got to get the feeling that Robinson has a chance to be the starting center back in Qatar. But keep in mind that the World Cup is coming very soon, because of COVID, we're off a cycle. So European Championship is usually 2 years off. It's only 1 year off now. And on top of that, they moved it from the summer to the winter.
Yeah.
So it's a year from, October, November, it kicks off. So a little over a year of the World Cup.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think Miles has a little ways to go if he's going to earn that position. Against a Haitian team where the team in general did not play, overly well. They got the job done at
Haiti is a decent side. I mean, not,
Yeah, I'm
not a great side.
I'm sorry. Like, I'm not going to go Stephen A. Smith here.
Yeah.
I'm just not. But we're talking about Haiti, and I expect the United States with an MLS kind of all-star team.
Yep,
that we should be able to handily beat Haiti, who unfortunately as a country doesn't have the resources that the U.S. has to get the training and everything. We need to get the job done 3-0 at minimum with an MLS all-star team, including Miles Robinson. So in my poll, and I voted in this one, I said that, how do you think he did in the 90 minutes? poor, okay, good, or amazing. I voted okay, which was 18%. Most people said good, which is fair. I think it was between okay and good, maybe.
Yeah, I would have gone in between okay and good.
11, yeah, okay, between okay and good is kind of where I am because, the thing is he didn't do anything of purpose in terms of outside of defending well. He got back in kind of a shaky moment and did some nice man-to-man like he always does, but almost got beat on that one. So I felt like he's a little shaky, even though he got the job done. No other mistakes. We didn't get scored on, so you can't fault him. But I can't think of that was like a really nice probing pass.
It's interesting, under DeBoer, Robinson had a bit of a swagger.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily feel like he quite has that swagger under Heinze. I don't know why that is.
It's just strange, right? Because they both kind of come from similar positions, right?
They're both defenders. And in fact, you would say DeBoer was more of a central defender, but Heinze finished his career when he was playing at Real Madrid and whatever. He was a center back. Okay. So it's not like he doesn't coach a center back. So, yeah, I don't know what that is. But, you will say, right, so Mexico gets a 0-0 draw, right? So if we're criticizing the U.S., right, Mexico dominated the match, but they got a 0-0 draw against
Trinidad and Tobago.
Trinidad, yeah.
And I don't know. I only watched the first half of the Guatemala game last night, but it was 0-0. Oh, no, it was 1-0 Mexico at halftime, so I didn't see how that one ended. But back to Atlanta United, another Twitter poll. Who's been the most valuable player so far this season? So games to date, and, I did my best to try to limit it to handful of field players who I think were worthy of that recognition. And I put Lennon, Sosa, Moreno, and Robinson in the poll. And Sosa, not surprisingly to me, won the poll. Yep. Some people felt very strongly that Robinson was the, at least in the comments, were unquestionably the right choice.
ATL On Fire audience, I think is clearly showing their sophistication because Sosa's been the class of the team thus far.
I agree. And Robinson has been rock solid too.
Sure.
But again, I agree. I don't know that he is, if you pull him out, I guess it's like if you have to pull out a player in this poll, like who's your most valuable, I'd be scared if Sosa was not in the lineup because he's just so valuable.
Well, the one match that he wasn't in the lineup was Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. On the road where, in fairness, we had a lot of players missing, but Chicago is a terrible side. And, without him, the team just looked lost.
Yeah.
So I think the play, we lost 3-0. We've been in, even with all the disappointing results, we've been in every match. And a lot of matches we deserved a little bit better. The Chicago match, we deserved to get hammered when he was out 3-0.
Yeah. So one of the things I've long observed with Atlanta United is because we are bold to invest in some of the best talent out there and pay the transfer fee and pay the salaries with designated players, is we are a team that is designed to win by having 3 designated players on the field. And at least 2 as many times as possible to have a chance to win. And there was a guy on our Twitter that looked at the data, and I'll have to find it here, but the last 2 years, when you looked at the data, there's just such a stark drop-off in our wins. Particularly how many times have we lost when we've had all 3 designated players on the field? Almost like never. It's like a handful of games.
But is that heavily skewed towards the Tata era?
No. Think about it. Like imagine right now, in my opinion, whether you call it's Alan Franco or Moreno, because I think Moreno's bought down now. But if you call it Moreno, Barco, and Josef, like they've never been on the field together this season. Maybe once. I don't know. I don't think maybe ever. And certainly not consistently. And that's where it becomes so frustrating, especially in a big international year like we have now, where rightfully some players are just not available. Mm-hmm. It plagues me in terms of really seeing the Atlanta United side that we have designed, right? It's not on the field ever.
Yeah. one of the things you have to consider as a manager is putting together a team is, all of these competitions, for example, maybe they should have known that Barco, with his age as an Argentinian national team, was right to play in a number of, U23 World Cup, Olympics, etc. That I don't think should have surprised anybody. Now you might say, look, you got to go for it, and if he's that good and he plays that well, and then he goes off and he comes back, it's fine. But for example, it always surprises me the European teams. The African Nations Cup occurs right in the middle of the European season, and a number of teams rely on a few African players, and then they disappear for a month and a half every few years. Right in the middle of the season, and those teams just fall apart, and you're like, well, as a general manager, you have to know that's coming.
Yeah.
Right? You have to know that I cannot have two players from Africa playing in the heart of my midfield and knowing that they're going to disappear for a middle part of the season and, going to cost us. So
what would you do if you're Heinze in the situation where Barca is likely going to go to the Olympics and Josef's going to be in the Copa America?
One of the things you would have to say when Atlanta United chose to stand, to stay put on the striker situation this offseason, they really didn't bring in a true backup striker.
Well, Lopez, I think, was a real dagger that he had personal issues.
Okay.
I think Lopez was their bet there.
But do you think that even when Martinez was gone, Lopez was going to be carrying the scoring load?
I think so. I think he
didn't show it when he played.
I certainly saw a lot more maturity in what he was able to contribute.
You're
in
saying
terms
that
of,
he was better than Kubo
Torres?
Yeah, that's a low bar, Mike.
His ideas, other than chewing on blue gum, were good as far as I'm concerned. I think with a little bit more time, I would have bet that Lopez would have started to knock some in the back of the net.
I didn't see it. I thought that. As good as Lopez is as a player, I thought he was past it even for MLS.
I think he would have been just as good as Tevez if we bring him over right now, which is not happening. Not happening, people.
Just wait.
I'm not waiting.
Who's the young Argentinian player from who they've been linked with? Who's the other possibility?
I know his last name, and Dirty South Soccer had written an article about it, like in terms of our targets, and this one was probably the most unlikely or the biggest stretch because he is a highly sought after player.
Yeah.
Evidently, Leeds United, Man City, some other English Premier League clubs are interested in this guy. He's 20 years old. His last name is Almada. I might be getting that wrong. I forget his first name. 20 years old. A striker again, but I love the fact that I'm hearing this type of rumor as being, if we go back to Josef ACL, whether it is a next generation player that we bring in behind Josef, which is what I think it would be, because I don't think we're getting rid of Josef. I think I'd rather see, you bring in a 20-year-old behind Josef that gets, mentored by him and eventually takes his job over.
But the problem is Josef Martinez 28, right? And so
he's got 2 more years at best and
I would say 2 to 4 years.
Jordan Morris.
The problem is, even 2 years, you got to figure this kid, if he's as good as people say he is, right? His goal is to come here and in 2 years be off to Europe. So that doesn't work.
Well, I think that's going to be the cycle of Atlanta United soccer forever, is 2 years and gone.
Yeah, especially but then that doesn't work for being the replacement for Martinez, because for the next 2 years, presumably he's still very much in his prime.
Okay, maybe not 2 years, but 3 years. And
we're splitting hairs here on the podcast.
We're splitting hairs, but also I think, if Josef again isn't putting up the numbers, then that 2 years is value. Maybe Josef isn't our starter. I know I'm being cold. To a lot of listeners out there that, want the wins, but want Josef to be our celebrity guy.
I'm going to propose something radical, Mikey Dobbs.
Yep.
Ready? Are
Yep.
you ready?
Hit me.
You can play with 2 strikers.
I know a lot of people were talking about that on Twitter today in this little group thing. I don't even know how Twitter works. I'm like,
Come on, you own Twitter.
I know, but no, I try not to understand too much about what
we have the best Twitter polls on.
We do have the best Atlanta United Twitter polls. I will say that outside of any other tweets out there.
Do we have any trivia?
And thank you for all the participation on the Twitter polls, everybody. I appreciate it.
Keep it coming.
Absolutely.
Do we have any trivia?
No, not tonight. We don't.
Okay, I have a trivia question for you.
All right, hit me.
What famous Atlanta United associated figure might make an appearance on the podcast?
Oh yeah, so that's a good point. So on Twitter, once again, I reached out to Jason Longshore, who is
Jason Longshore,
yeah, the 92.9 The Game on air commentator for Atlanta United, was nice enough to suggest he'd maybe make some time to join our show in an upcoming episode. So you and I need to get our act together here and put an agenda together for Jason and pick his brain. So I think it's a good timing too, with so much happening with Atlanta United. It'll be great to get somebody like Jason, who is super level-headed. I've heard a lot of his interviews on 92.9 The Game and other.
So you mean the opposite of you, Mikey?
Yeah, the opposite of me. He's not overly emotional. So I think you and Jason will be able.
The rant is on, ladies and gentlemen. Now, a real guest. It's almost like we're going to be a real podcast.
I know, right? Look at that, year 3.
And I must say, I really support the radio podcast. A number of times I've been, hearing about with my kids, at their own soccer or whatever, and I'm listening to the game on the radio, so I really appreciate that. I also say the Nashville game, which I tried to watch live on the airplane, there's no chance with Valley Sports. It's impossible.
Yeah, no. Yeah, so for all the people with the local TV broadcasting challenges, just a shout out to 92.9 The Game, who's supported the club from the get-go. Tune in. Jason Longshore is definitely fantastic.
92.9 The Game, yes. Valley Sports, no.
Man, can they at least cut a deal with somebody? I don't care who. One of the streaming services.
Somebody's got to blink. I mean, come on, right?
Oy vey. What else do you want to talk about, Dave? We're kind of wrapping it up here.
There's been so much, so much soccer on television. We've had the European Championship epic ending. Yeah. We had the South Copa America,
the Nations League tournament,
and the Gold Cup. So tonight,
yeah,
U.S. versus
who will
Martinique.
be the greatest team in the world, Martinique or USA? Come on. If it's not a complete bloodbath, I'm going to be upset, personally.
They speak French in Martinique, so,
I know, and that's the thing. It's interesting you say that, but, that's where a lot of French players who could be on the French national team, right, actually kind of see the writing on the wall. They're never going to make the French national team.
And Mbappe.
And yeah, right. They're like, I'm not going to take Pogba or whoever's position.
Martinique's like,
Conte,
we'll take him.
And so Martinique's like, come on over. So I say that with that actually being an actual real thing in terms of, well, how could Martinique field a challenging team? Well, I think that is one of the lifelines that they have in terms of being a small nation, is they do have that as a way to recruit, citizens that, how that works these days is a little bit more
flexible. So what
flexible.
do you think of Qatar's chance of winning the World Cup as the host nation?
Do you know
that Qatar, here's a trivia question.
Yep.
Is Qatar larger or smaller than the state of Connecticut?
I'm going to go smaller. I have a pretty good sense of where it sits on the map, although that is on a map an exaggerated part of like a flat map, the way that it works and the way that it's So depending on where you are on the latitude, but I'm going to guess that Qatar is actually smaller than Connecticut.
It's apparently very close, but yes, you're correct. It is smaller than the state of Connecticut. So there are all.
Oh, you know what? I have
all
that.
10 stadiums or something are within 45 minutes.
Yeah, I have that wrong, by the way. So when you look at a map that's flat, so like Greenland looks huge.
Are you saying the Earth is flat?
I'm not going there. No, for you flat earthers, come over here and you got it coming to you.
We haven't talked about the billionaires who launched themselves into space. No.
How about that? No, we're not going there either.
ATL on Fire
but no, evidently, so if you look at a flat map, like Greenland looks, like it's a huge part of the northern part of Africa, right? But Africa is absolutely gigantic. And so the way that it's represented on a flat map, anyway, take that into context.
Kind of like Marietta.
Yeah. Mayretta. The big chicken looks way bigger than it is. So what do you think our chances are of beating New England here on Saturday? You're going to be at the game, right?
Yeah, well, I was feeling a little bit better because, with Josef being back and Alan Franco being apparently healthy. And
any word on Ronald Hernandez, who played in the Copa America, seems fit? Like, are we going to see him?
I mean, it seems like, we had this conversation early. Was it Ronald Hernandez wasn't ready? Or was it Brooks Lennon had just beat him out? It seems like Brooks Lennon beat him out.
So what about Bello and Miles being out on the left side, both center and on the left outside? Like, does he have can he play that if we needed him on the left side?
I was wondering whether Hernandez could play in the center back maybe, or if the other possibility is. With Jürgen Damm still struggling, whether or not Hernandez can come in at right back, and then Lennon can move up to outside midfield and give us a little bit more of attack.
So Jürgen Damm, is he going to be on the eligible list of players for New England?
I don't know.
It's unclear on my spreadsheet. I don't know.
Question mark.
And then
so your spreadsheet is exactly like Atlanta United.
Yeah. It's unclear on. Do you think
unclear, unclear.
Alan Franco gets to start with Miles Robinson being out?
I would be shocked if that's not true, but
Alex DeJean broken out, not available with a broken elbow. I mean,
who knew Alex DeJean was going to get any playing time? And obviously Campbell is the other possibility. Yeah. He hasn't gotten any look whatsoever. Obviously, Heinz doesn't rate him. I don't hate
Campbell. Like, the minutes I've seen, he doesn't look like he's
super young.
Somebody that I want to necessarily see get a starting role right now. But I feel like there's a lot of promise still with what I've seen. He's a strong guy, like built, but very much like your homegrown kind of MLS style player. But
the homegrown players have not. If you want to talk about. What has been disappointing in the club thus far. I mean, homegrown players. I mean, outside of Bello, who, has established himself, but hasn't made a huge dent yet. Maybe he'll do it. But, the homegrown players, non-existent. Yeah. I mean, we've had a number of them who are supposed to be this and that. We keep hearing about how the Atlanta United Academy is this and that. They win championships. They've got all these young players, whatever. Nobody. Either they're not giving them a chance or they're not good enough.
Is Jackson Conway homegrown? What's his story?
Jackson Conway is a homegrown.
Okay.
Chuck Chall is. So,
yeah.
He got a first
there's two, right?
I mean, maybe Heinz is different. But.
Yeah. So, I agree. I think Bello, particularly the last 2 years, not a super fast ascension, but steady things that I'm seeing that show that he's maturing. Miles is not homegrown, but he's an MLS draft, right?
Yeah, MLS draft. So we had Gressel and Robinson came out of the draft.
Yeah.
The other guy who left this year, Galloway or whatever.
For Austin FC.
Yeah,
John Gallagher.
Gallagher, sorry. He was draft pick too.
Yeah. And by the way, he had a fabulous first goal for.
Yeah, so you got to say that.
First goal for them at home.
I mean, apparently Bocanegra has been in charge of MLS, scouting and the draft. And you got to say the draft, who most people say does nothing for any of the MLS teams, because very few of the players are coming out of college. We've done pretty well. I mean, Robinson, Gressel.
In today's cancel culture after an article or whatever, like Boak out, Eels out, Heinze out, like all these people, like, okay, it's like war's not the answer. Okay, well, tell me what the solution is, because like, what do you got?
That's not like you. So you're Wait. I'm a little bit confused. Are you defending the people saying out, or are you saying that's crazy?
That's crazy.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I mean, it's crazy. Like, and I'm not a fan of war either. Okay, but point being, and I don't want to go there, but like, okay, well, come with your solutions that are at least realistic when someone isn't getting the job done. I don't know. I'll retract from that. But
yeah, and even coaching wise, even if Heinze turns out to be a bust, as De Boer sort of did, you got to say that they weren't, horrific choices, right? They're taking a chance and whatever, and I still feel I'm still gonna stay. I'm still on the Heinze bandwagon. I think it's too early to say anything about whether or not he's really
like I said, like, I mean, when have we seen any of our starters on the field together? Not only the designated players, but literally like the people that you would just look at the map and be like, yes, give these players 90 minutes together, and let's see whether it's Alan Franco, Ronald Hernandez, Miles.
And honestly, for a lot of this season, if you had taken the way Atlanta had played and add to it a healthy Martinez who can finish, we would be at the top of the table or near the top of the table. So,
I mean, our starting squads have been completely not what an ideal coach would pick. And there's a multitude of reasons for it. And I know every team deals with that, but I feel like Heinze coming into the situation, only having hand selected a few that he was able to pull in this year, that you've got to give him more runway. And I like a coach that's got a lot of attitude. I mean,
yeah, fair.
So
that's a Mikey Dobbs style coach right there. And we have no idea. I mean, this is why you get into all these problems with speculation, because the club doesn't tell you anything. At least here you heard from the club that it was Heinze's decision. It's not an injury. They aren't playing games with that. So it's clearly coach's decision. And Heinze owned up to it. He said it was me and only me. And so
which, to me is the pissing match that Josef's had with Tata and Frank de Boer, and now with Heinze. And Heinze is definitely going to win this one. And I'm okay with that. And, the idea that it's something transfer related, there's a possibility, but I just don't believe it. It's
as a Man United coach, as a Man United fan, I mean, we talk about Alex Ferguson, and he wouldn't take nothing from nobody. Beckham doing too many commercials, bye bye. Yop Stam, talking about this, bye bye. Right, like he had no problem with being like, see ya.
Yeah.
So you play for my team. You play the way I play. Want you to play, or
I mean, right now, if that's his attitude, I want Heinze here for even longer. I want to give him even more runway if he's going to lay down the law. And out of the article coming out of the Athletic, it seemed to me there was a little bit of naiveness with Frank de Boer on understanding what was going on and how to put the hammer down. I think he got almost overrun by the team to some degree, with the whole meeting and the how do we play nice in the sandbox? And at the end of the day, he lost control of the team, where Heinze is going to refuse to do that. And if that means he gets fired, I think he's okay with it, and he's going to move on. And so I'm good with that.
Amen.
So
on that note,
this wine, by the way, is fantastic. So I'm glad I won that bet.
Well, here's to you, Mikey Dobbs, and here's to ATL on Fire.
Here's to ATL on Fire. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We are going to hopefully do one shortly here and tune back in. So thanks, everyone.
See ya.